But after you do it for a couple of years, you're just updating things. You're not finding all the new informations and coming up with new goals. You're just updating. And then it becomes a lot easier. Then it becomes a lot more fulfilling, and it's a lot more helpful to you. The longer you do it, the more valuable it becomes. Welcome to Tell Your Boss I Quit with me, Pete Gutekunst, the podcast where we help you financially bridge from where you've started to the life goals you've imagined.
Obviously, you've been focused on the journal and how this can help people kind of set goals and stay on task with those goals.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, obviously, we want to talk about accountability and how that pertains to the journals, right? So when you're kind of coming up with financial goals or just goals in general, it could be, how are you kind of leveraging the journal to hold yourself accountable or hold your clients accountable?
Yeah, well, I can do it either way. I could talk about what I'm doing because I'm not the shoemaker who doesn't bother worrying about my own shoes. So, when you're journaling things, what you're writing about is what you're thinking about in the moment. It's how you feel and what you want to do, which is a big difference from a diary. A diary is what you did. A journal is more about the emotional and it's more aspirational. And that's what I think the importance and the distinction there is. And so when you're thinking about what your goals are, write them down, and that's your aspirations. That's what you hope to do. And then how are you going to go about doing that? And if you start writing that down, that's the difference. When you write something down, a dream and a wish becomes a goal. And if you write it down, it becomes something you can measure and become accountable of. You can go back and say, did I do it? How well did I do it? What could I have done better? Or how can I enhance it and make it even better going forward? If we just sort of think about it up here in our brain, it may never happen. And that's really why you want to start writing these things down. And that's the point of a journal. So that's really what, from a journaling standpoint, it takes on a lot of elements when we tie it into your financial planning.
So when you're coming up, like you have this idea, like this is a great idea, by the way, I should be doing more of this just for all the stuff that I'm kind of in, not even financial related, but obviously you can use that in that realm as well, but just trying to get thoughts and goals and things you want down so you can look at them tangibly and say, okay, this is nice to have. Now I can look back on this and remember, oh, I wanted to do this. Like this is actually a goal I had. How do you take the notes, just like the scratch paper notes of your goals, and turn them into something that can be measured for accountability purposes?
So that's really the key, I think, is there are, what are the things that you should be measuring? And I talk about it all the time. A tool that we have is called your primary planning element. So that is what you have saved, whether it's checking or your investment accounts, your retirement accounts, you want to put in there, what you're putting in there. And so think of that as your balance sheet, basically. It's your assets and liabilities, but it's a little more than that too. And then aside to that is what do you want it to do and what's the purpose of it? So that's where the goal part of it comes into play. Is I think to make goals, financial goals, the most important thing of all is your cash flow. So doing a cash flow analysis. So having that balance sheet, which is part of the primary planning elements, but it's also the cash flow because that's what you spend and that's how you live your lifestyle. In order to do the things you want to do, the goals you want to fulfill have a monetary value to them. But it's hard to wrap our heads. We get all wrapped up or confused by the dollar sign. So the goals are, what do you want to do? Do you want to retire when you're 60? Do you want to put your kids through college in 18 years or 5 years from now? Do you want to buy a second house? Whatever it is, get that written down, write it down. And that's really, I think, the starting point of a journal is because then you start to marry the two together because now we have something that we can measure progress toward. And that's really, I think, the purpose of having a journal is how well are you accomplishing that?
So let's just do this. All right. I think this is a better way because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to say, here's how you do it. Mm-hmm. Let's just peel it back and say right now, I don't even think you're supposed to do this in content, but listen, we're recording this right now in January, right? It's the beginning of the year. Everybody's doing the fresh start. Everybody's like, Happy New Year. And if you're listening to this right now, it might not be that time of year, but this is where the accountability will be shown here.
Okay. This will
You
be
are,
like our time capsule.
yeah, this will be something we'll go back and revisit, and we'll see
Okay.
where we're
I like
actually
that.
at. Let's do
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And I'm going to do this on you. I'm going to put it on you. So, you
Okay.
beginning of the year, I know we talked in the past episodes where we're actually you have some things going on in your life. You're
Mhm.
writing these things down. You're actively using the journal
Yeah.
process.
Mhm.
What's going on at the beginning of your year right now, and what can we look at maybe 5 months from now and look back and say, okay, how do I measure these goals?
That's the beauty of January 1st. You turn the calendar. It's just a natural time to be able to take a measure of where you started the year or ended the year, however you want to look at that. So all of those things on your balance sheet, let's just get them written down. If you already have a primary planning elements, you're just updating it. If you're starting from scratch, okay, well, let's get the numbers filled in. So we know what you have and where the cash flow is, what's coming in. And if you use Quicken or something like that, I've been a big advocate of YNAB. You need a budget, YNAB. It's not a free software tool, but it's something that just does a great job of downloading all your spending. And if you categorize it, you can run a quick report, and it'll just show you by category and how specific you want to be by category where your money went. So now we know what you have and we know what you spend. And so if you look at that, do you have more coming in than you did? So you're asking me, what do I do? So in my case, my youngest son is done. Well, not done. He's in his last semester of college, and I've written the last tuition check, hopefully, that I will ever write again. And I've been doing that. I have three children, so I've put three children through school. This is the last one. In theory, come August, that tuition check I wrote last year, I should be able to write this year to myself, all things being equal, right? Is
Right.
you
Yeah,
follow
that
that,
seems
right?
fair.
So that's one thing I'm writing down right now. I know what I did last year, and if I don't write that down, and if I don't make that a commitment, or at least a reminder to myself, back to the accountability, I'm sure my wife and I could find plenty of things to run out and do for $10,000. It would be very nice. But I think we're pretty happy with the way things are anyway. So why do that? Why not put that aside? So that's something that I'm jotting down. I'm kind of looking back what I did last year. So that's one idea. My cash within my own business has accumulated. So I'm aware of that, and I have a pretty good idea of what I would like to set aside or move out of the business as far as those reserves, and get that put to work and added to my investments. And I have some new hires coming on board, so my expenses are going to be a little bit different. So I've put a pin in that, and I said, well, let me just see where I am at the end of the first quarter. So I would like to be able to make that investment, and I expect, based on cash flow again, where I'll be and how much I should be able to do that. So I'm saying these things right now. In some ways, maybe I am feeling nearly prepared, but I'm not sure, and I want to do some verification of that. And at the end of the first quarter, I'm no different than a client. There's probably things that I could do right now, and I'm a little bit cautious. So that's why I'm saying I want to wait till I get these new expenses underway. So those are the things that I'm writing down. I'm writing down where I believe I'm going to be able to save more than I did in my own investments because of no tuition. I believe I'm going to be able to save more in my investments because my income has grown, and I'm going to make sure of that excess that I believe I'll have by the first quarter, because I'll have a better input as of expenses. So those are the things I'm saying. So if this is a time capsule, um, I should have a sum of money that I have written down that I'm going to be adding to my investments, and I believe I'm going to have a business reserve starting the second quarter of this year, where I would like that to be, and that's something that's accumulated over time. So I've got that ready to roll. Um, I I continue to invest in the way that I have been, so I know those things are going in. So those are all the pieces, and so that's really. I'm kind of rambling on with your question, but I get excited about this stuff. Um, so that isn't just sidebar. Go off on a tangent here.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to do that, or do I have to wait for you to ask me
Absolutely.
a question?
Sidebars
Okay.
are my favorite. Yeah.
So, I didn't talk about what I invested in. I didn't talk about what the market's doing or what I think it might do in the next quarter or the next year, because I'm thinking much longer than that. And so I'm thinking about cash flow, and I have an opportunity to do certain things. I have some capital improvements that I want to make to my house. I have, some nicer trips now that the kids are grown that my wife and I are doing. We're spending money a little bit differently, but I also have the ability to continue to add and contribute. And I see where I'm going to be, believe I'm going to be at the end of the first quarter. And so when I get there, I've written down how much I should be saving on March 31st based on all of these things that I'm talking about. And I then went in on my own financial plan and entered all of those things. And when can I work less? Because I don't want to retire. I'll tell you that right. Just for anyone who's wondering. Yeah. But I can be in a position where, as my book says, tell your boss I quit. I want to be in a position where I can, if I'm forced to, if I have to, or life changes, I want to be in a position just like I help my clients do. And so I reran all of those assumptions. And I'm finding at this stage of life that I'm able to do more or save more than I was even just a few years ago, because revenue has grown, tuition has gone away. So the things that so that was a long answer to a question about what am I going to write. So let's come back to the time capsule.
Yeah.
So based on my cash flow, I have a balance of where I am today. Based on excess cash flow I believe I will have in the next 3 months on the business, I believe where that number will be. And therefore, I intend to take a sum of that money and add it to my investments. I intend to take that tuition check that I paid in the first quarter, and I believe I'm going to make that an additional investment. So I'm going to do it sooner than next August. That's my goal.
Okay.
That's another piece. So those are the things that I have done. And then that's kind of the inputs. And so those are the things we want to be accountable to. I meet a lot of people, and they might say, I'm finding I have $1,000 extra a month. And I'll say, well, then 6 months from now, you probably will have $6,000 laying around, right? And as their accountability partner, I will check in and I will say, okay, where's the $6,000? I don't know. Okay, what happened? And sometimes the hot water heater went, and, the kids had a special activity, or the car needed a new set of tires. Who knows? There could be a very legitimate reason for that. But sometimes it's like, literally, I'm not really sure. And so if you don't come back to that, you'll just get into the pattern of spending the free cash flow that you have without this accountability. So if you write it down in a journal, I should have $6,000 in my savings account. Well, now the money you believe you're going to be able to save, there's proof in the pudding. So now you can start dollar cost averaging into your investments, because you've proven to yourself you can do it without putting it out of reach in a place where you need it to be. That's where this accountability comes into play.
For sure. And that makes a lot of sense. And I always get to that phase where it's like, here's a bunch of ideas, here's a bunch of goals I have, really kind of morphing it and turning it into something that is a real goal is I think a lot of people's biggest challenge. Everybody can come up with a goal and say, I want to do this, but forming it and actually, turning it into something that you can look at and say, here it is. That's to me the biggest part of this process. Yep. And setbacks do happen. And I don't know if set forwards are a thing. Is that a thing where people, I don't think that's the term for it, but maybe they come into some money and they're farther ahead, along. When you're setting that goal, I'm cutting you off. When you're setting that goal, are you factoring in like a window where like, this is the target? Here's the, optimistic view. If you really want to go for it, you can go high. And then here's the low end barring setback. Are you kind of making that like the target window?
Well, see, that's the power of journaling. If you think about it, really is if you should have this excess cash flow, do you have that much extra sitting around because you really had that excess? I'm using that same example to answer your question. And if you do that, then then, okay, well, now I can, maybe I won't save the whole thousand, but I clearly have this extra money every month. So maybe I'll start with 250 or 500 and see how that goes. The problem I see is that if you think you have an extra thousand and you try saving 1,000 a month, and then something happens, would you call it the problem forward, or
The step forward. Yeah.
yeah. So if that happens, that's part of the plan. I mean, I have people say to me, "Here's what I spend, and that's kind of my annual run rate, but it seems like this year I had to do fix the car, I keep saying the same things over and over again, but fix the car, fix the HVA, something happened." Well, guess what? Something happens every year.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to buy a new HVAC system every year, but when you do, it's a big number. And so you probably don't have that big of a number, but maybe a hot water heater kind of number, a $1,500 to $2,000 kind of cost. So that becomes, all right, I have 1,000 extra a month, but then I bought a hot water heater and that was 2,000, which is why I only have 4,000. Okay, well then let's make an adjustment to your goal. So that's the problem. If you don't write these things down and make yourself accountable to them and work through this journaling process, you'll just say, I should have $6,000 in 6 months and I only have 3,000. I have no idea what happened. This is never going to work, blah, 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 blah. And then you just don't, you don't succeed, or you don't believe that it's achievable. And I think that's the real distinction is if you're making yourself accountable to your goals and tracking where you want to get to, and then looking at that over that old period of time, saying, how close did I get to reaching my goals? What caused me to make it or not make it? That's really, you can still take celebration in the fact that you have 4,000, even though your goal was to save 6,000. And how do you, expand on that? And that's the difference. If you write down a goal and you keep yourself accountable and track it, then you start to feel what I, consider fulfillment. I wanted to do this. I didn't get all the way, but I still had a pretty good outcome. That's fulfillment. If you're just kind of, I don't know what I said, I didn't get there, then you're disappointed. And so that's why I think people struggle with goal making, is if you don't write it down, you don't track it, you don't make a journal or some way to keep yourself accountable or keep track of how well you made your way towards your goals, goals are going to make you feel disappointed, not fulfilled. And this is really a way to have fulfillment in your life, and goals being fulfilled allows you to make bigger, better goals, which is more fulfillment, which is just, it just is an enhancing process, not a disappointing process.
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to spin off on that, where I know everybody just wants to start, right? When you start, you get from point A, you make an A, and then you make a B, and that's good job. You just accomplished a goal, or you got close to a goal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But starting the journal now, looking back at like 3 years from now at every single input that you've gone in, how are you using that process? Like just reflecting back on past goals that maybe you didn't achieve, maybe you did and exceeded. And then how are you using that information to better set goals in your journal moving forward?
I think you just said it is, do you make your goals or do you exceed them? And what you didn't say is, did you do pretty good? There's an in-between there. And so if you set a goal and you didn't quite reach it, but it was still, hey, that was actually not a half bad outcome. I'm better off than I was. I didn't reach my full goal. That's a good outcome. And that's something to celebrate and latch on to. And that's, I think that's very, very powerful. I also think when you're journaling and going through the process that you just said over a period of years, I find this with the people that I work with, we'll look back over 5 or even 10 years and just say, look, this is where you started. This is the amount of money you've withdrawn over that period of time. And look at what you have now. And it just makes going forward and feeling comfortable and feeling confident that much better, because then you see that it really did work. And you remember, you go back and you think there were some years in there, we're recording this at the very beginning of 2025. 2022 was a pretty tough year in the stock and the bond market. And people, generally speaking, probably see better balances in their accounts right now. So if they look back 5 years, just before the beginning of COVID shutdown, they're probably, if they did okay in their investments, but remembering that that was stuck in the middle. Those are, I think, are very powerful things to reflect upon that say, yeah, that's why I do this. That's why this works. That's why I will continue to do it. And then back to this goal making process. I'm going to put in so much money to save for some future goal, but I know how this works. It's not always going to go up. Sometimes it's going to go down, but in 5, 6, 7 years or longer, whatever your time frame is, I know that this works. It just makes you more confident and enables you to make stronger goals. And it also, like I said, makes you able to set new goals where, well, now I can help my grandkids with their college tuition because this thing is going along pretty well and I'm better off than I thought I was going to be. But I only know that because I set goals, I followed them, and I look at where I am.
So I think I don't know if this is a real statistic, but I would say 85 to 90% of goal setting happens at the beginning of the year, right? It's like everybody starts the year and they're like, this is when it's going to happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are you saying to the people who are maybe listen to this right now in the middle of the year where it's not January where you're excited and you're eager to set the goals. It's not the end when you're able to look back and reflect. You're sitting in the middle of it right now. How do you stay accountable in the middle of a goal?
That's really, I think I'm going to bring this back to the journal and writing things down and remembering and keeping track of that is, first of all, when I was a little kid, I don't know the first time I heard this, but today is the first day of the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to wait till January 1st. This is the day to get yourself in order. So I think that's key. And there's a commercial I'm seeing. I wish I could remember what it's for, but there's a commercial right now about setting goals. It's for some kind of, I think, health app or something like that, but it's an app on your phone. And it says that, most people give up on their goals or their resolutions, I guess, by January 15th. I don't know if that's like a day or something. Mm-hmm. In the commercial, the guy says, January 15th is give up on your goals or resolutions day. Look it up, so I haven't looked it up. So for those of you who are listening, you can check that out. My point is that if you're writing these things down, you can come back to them. So if in the 15th of January, you already feel like you're falling off the rails a little bit, but you open up that journal a month later, darn, I got off track. Now it's January 1 again. I'm going to start now. It's the middle of the year and this is a really cool thing you guys are talking about, but it's not the beginning of the year. Okay, we'll start today and we'll go 6 months from now, but 6 months from now, we'll be at the beginning of the year and then we'll be doing it every calendar year after that. The thing that I find is when I sit down and work through this kind of a process and introduce this concept to people, I ask them for information that they don't entirely have, or it's just not as specific as they would like. So I ask them, let's just start keeping track of it every month. So 6 months from now, we'll have some real data. And when I ask them for it and I remind them to give it to me every month, 6 months from now, we have that data. And so that's back to, that's an accountability partner. It's not the journal doing the accountability or doing it on its own. You've got someone reminding you. So that's what I would say that person in the middle of the year, either go back 6 months and compile the data, or if that's too much work, let's get it going forward. So by the end of the year, we'll have a lot of good information to help us set goals and get ourselves rolling for the next year and the year after that. This whole thing it's the beginning that's so overwhelming. It's a lot of stuff. It's tedious. It's new to us. But after you do it for a couple of years, you're just updating things. You're not finding all the new informations and coming up with new goals. You're just updating. And then it becomes a lot easier. And then back to my fulfillment world, then it becomes a lot more fulfilling and it's a lot more helpful to you going forward. The longer you do it, the more valuable it becomes.
So maybe this is just me talking. I'm just trying to imagine, you and I sitting down and trying to set a journal up for me. Yeah, and okay. There's probably people out there that might be like me, where they might have a lot of ideas for goals, and it could come at any time. So how how would you work with somebody who maybe at the beginning of the year has these goals that they want, but in the middle of those goals, they're coming to you with other goals now? How are you prioritizing those goals, and how do you handle something like that?
Well, prioritize is the key word. Are the new goals just new? Are they chasing the new shiny object of the day? Or did something change in your life that made that a new important goal? You might have, a child who's going and doing well in school, and you've all of a sudden discovered this musical talent or something like that, and going to a special kind of a school that costs out of pocket money instead of public school wasn't something you even thought about 6 months ago. Kids change a lot in short order. You if you don't know it by now, you're going to find that out. So that might be a goal. Okay, well, is that more important than saving for that, the second house that you said you were saving for, or whatever that's going on the back burner, or that's less important? No, you know what? We were just wondering. And a lot of these things are, I would say, are wonderings. So I'm going to bring it back to do you have the ability to save, or do you have excess income? And I always find it amazing, but that's not an easy question for people to answer, because money comes in and they spend it, and then they wait for the next paycheck or the next deposit, and then they spend it, and they don't really think about where it's going. And this process doesn't have to get real granular on that, but it does get you to think about it. And it does get you to see, this month was out of character relative to other months, and what did I do different in that month? It helps you identify that, and then prioritize whether or not that's something you want to do and will continue to do, or could that be, prioritized out? And that's how you get to the new goal. So you're raising an absolute point, is if you don't write it all down and you don't know what your first goal was, and then the goal changes, you'll have no idea what threw off the first goal and why you're not achieving the second goal. You're going to be all over the map. So it's okay to do that, but you said it right when you said prioritize, is that something is going to be sacrificed. You're not going to save as much or have as much for something else if you have a new or different goal. And that's okay. You just have to prioritize it. I think I have that conversation probably surprisingly to many people, is we talk about that kind of a thing. I don't have a right answer. I'm not going to tell you this is how much you should spend and this is how you should live your life. I just want to help you find out what your life costs you. And then you start to tell me what these other goals are. And we might just say, look, that's going to be really hard to do unless you make a sacrifice on this other priority over here. That's that's the part of this conversation. And if we're doing a journaling like conversation, or writing these things down in a journal, we can have that conversation and make those decisions and feel good about it.
So that's comforting to hear, because I just want to make sure that when we do have this conversation, you're not mad at me because I'm coming all over the place with like different ideas. Like I'm just bringing things in and just saying, hey, wait, this I want to do this over here, but wait, I know at the beginning of the year we said this. That's good to hear that you can handle this, and it's also nice to know I'm not alone. That there's people out there.
You're not. Yeah, that's a great point. You're not alone. I think that's really, I said at the beginning, we haven't even really, we hardly ever talk about investments and what's going on in the markets and the economy. Those things are unimportant. And believe me, I have my finger on that pulse and we keep track of that. And it's absolutely important. But this is why you have what you have. And depending on the time frame and your comfort level with all of that, it makes a difference on what you're going to do with it and how important it is that you get it done. And if you don't have that conversation, you're just going to end up talking about what the S&P 500 did and whether or not you did well relative to that. And it has nothing to do with your goals being accountable to anything. Maybe that'll raise enough money and maybe it won't. Who knows? This is why this is so important. Thank you for listening. And if our discussion resonates with you, let's start a conversation about what matters most to you. Go to goodfinancial.com, click contact, and schedule a 30-minute chat. I'd love to hear from you.